I think we're living through something like the Salem witch trials, one of those completely insane historical events that will be talked about and studied for hundreds of years to come.
They are allowing the mutilation, sterilization of children. I mean, these are foul people.
They can't say that they've made a mistake because they're relativists.
Well, to me, it looked like gay rights in the beginning. Nobody knew what they were supporting in the beginning. The Democrats were the champions of gay rights. Trans activism waited for gay rights to be over, then made their civil rights campaign look exactly like gay rights in every way on a superficial level.
Why don't the horror stories of detransitioners seem to have any effect?
That's a great question.
I think that should give us courage.
Exposure to other people's perspectives.
Moving us in a good direction.
Paid Substack subscribers, thank you. I'm here with Brett and Mia, and if you don't know who they are, then you're fools. So Brett, ask us some questions, and then we'll take it from there.
I'm really interested in how bad ideas come and go throughout the ages, and we live in a particular time where something known as woke has begun to take off. A subspecies of that is this trans issue, where people are seemingly defying what has been accepted science for the last few centuries, and we can just wantonly change our biological gender at any whim by either medical interventions or simply saying that you're the other gender. Now, I don't know as much about this as you guys.
Can I just interrupt you already? Yeah. Is there anything he said that clicked with you? Like you were like, oops?
That we disregard everything that we've always known. That's it. Like, that's what the trans movement makes us do, is forget everything that we know about science and human existence.
See, I thought you were going to say it's gender.
I don't use the word gender. Are you using gender as a synonym for sex?
I tend to, but I understand where the impulse comes from to separate out the two. Because I guess there is a group of people who want to adhere to a certain scientific rationality, going to say, well, you've got your XY chromosomes and your YY chromosomes, so therefore let's define that as sex, a difference between male and female. And then they want to separate that from gender, how one expresses or chooses to express themselves in the world.
Right, and then, but there's the first problem. So-called gender-affirming care targets the sex characteristics.
Yes. And what's the problem with that then, though? If someone, let's go with the harder case for the moment. The adult who says, look, I was born into the wrong body. Although I have this penis, I feel like I'm a female, I want to get rid of it, and my brain is telling me each and every day that I am a female. They want to have the surgery. Should they not?
I personally think it's ill-advised. Do you think somebody can be born in the wrong body? What do you think about that? The idea that somebody can be born in the wrong body?
No, I think it's irrational. I think that our minds are running on the substrate of the brain, and so it gets deep into personal identity. But to say you're born in the wrong body, I mean, even if you claim that you have been, all you're doing by going through this surgery is changing the body that you've been born into. So being born into the wrong body, you're not changing bodies, you're just changing the body that you were born into rather than changing bodies altogether.
Right, it's an absurd idea. For me, it's if you're born in the wrong body, where's your body? There's someone else walking around in your body. Do you know why they do that, though, the born in the wrong body? Do you know why they present it that way?
I guess so that they have legitimacy to the argument that they can need to go through this surgery, and probably moreover that the rest of us should pay for it as well, because it's like a disability.
Yeah, I think they made trans rights look exactly like gay rights, and the success of gay rights was born this way. They framed it, born this way, there's nothing we can do, and that was hugely successful. Trans rights comes along, they want to just piggyback off the success of gay rights, so they go with born in the wrong body, which is completely absurd.
I think Douglas Murray made that point about it's like St George in retirement syndrome or something like that. You know, people fought the big battles of the past against racism, against homophobia, and now all the dragons have been slayed. And so now St George is sort of swinging wildly with his sword at non-existent dragons, namely, well, there's all these people against the trans community. Do you think a trans community even exists? Because we're always told that there is this large group of people, they're either being genocided or they're being oppressed in some way.
They, first of all, to define a transgender person is almost impossible. Look at who's underneath the transgender umbrella. You've got transvestites, just men who are turned on by wearing women's clothing. You've got autogynephilic men, they have a paraphilia, they wish to actually physically become women, that's their fantasy. You've got gender non-conforming homosexuals who seek a medical remedy for their internalized homophobia. Then you've got kids on the autism spectrum who are just confused and they think that the reason they don't fit in is because they're trans. You've got young women who've experienced trauma and they're trying to escape their female body. You've got a whole range of people who have nothing in common. None of those groups, maybe the transvestites and the autogynephilic men, they have something in common, and the rest have nothing in common with anyone else. So no, there's no trans community. It's just this great big mix of people.
Mm-hmm. But they nonetheless have certain, I guess, objectives within this push. I think, would we all admit there are trans-identified people who are not on board with the woke ideology, who generally aren't activists, they're not out there shouting people down.
Correct.
However, of the people that are doing that shouting down, it's not just the trans issue that seems to be animating them. They're on board with a whole bunch of strange ideologies that are anti-enlightenment, I would say. Everything from Marxism through to the far green left kind of stuff and just anti-capitalist. It seems to be, you know, it's almost like the woke starter kit. You have to take on all his ideas to be part of that kind of community. It's like a political, is that a political community, a political ideology?
Oh, it very much is. It's a political identity, so sure, it's a political community. I've noticed something in Canada, I don't know if it goes across the border, but the trans-identified people who are the activists are also members of this cult of the mask. They can't let go of the COVID mask. They're still wearing them now as if it's still going on.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? It's just because I have also noticed that.
Why do you think that is?
It seems to be a social signal. You know, in the past, people might have worn a little the Ukraine flag or the Palestinian flag or whatever. It's just a nice, neat way to say I vote Democrat, or you know, I'm with Kamala or something. I was noticing it. Sometimes I genuinely think, okay, maybe this person is immunosuppressed or whatever, but that'd be the rare exception to the rule.
I think that.
Yeah. But I've seen young people getting on an airport bus just the other day in LA. I thought, rather too many of them. They seem to be young and strong, but they're wearing the mask. So.
Yeah, you almost never see that when we're abroad, unless we were in Asia. But it's a social signal.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm better than you. I care about other people, so I'm gonna. I don't know. I find it bizarre. They wear them outside.
Yes, but do you think that there can be well-adjusted people psychologically who might transition at least partially? So I think of someone like Blair White, and who has interesting quips. I was telling Peter before, one I like to quote is a trans child is like a vegan cat. We know who's making the decisions. But she seems to be a reasonably well-adjusted person who, born a male. You disagree?
I don't think he's well adjusted at all. I think he's flipped back and forth a few times, transition and then back, and I think there's some positioning himself as a reasonable person, but I don't see how. I just don't think anyone who takes those steps and mimics a member of the opposite sex can be well adjusted. There are varying degrees. There's a spectrum. There are certainly some who are more well balanced than others. But no, I wouldn't hold Blair White or Buck Angel or any of the big influencers. I don't think I have this thing where I don't think we need anyone trans-identified as public figures, influencers, because they trigger the social contagion, they spread the idea, and I think that's more harm than good.
But there are different ways that people express themselves in the world, I suppose. So you do get somewhat more effeminate. Even, you know, the concept of the metrosexual is typically not the rugged tradesperson who's going to be, you know, out there hammering and building a house, but rather they're well manicured. Look at Peter. Very metrosexual.
I'm definitely not. I'm absolutely not a metrosexual.
Okay, then we put Peter at the far end of the masculine spectrum, but then there is a continuum all the way through to people like myself, or people, you know, who are a little bit more effeminate. Do you grant that spectrum at least?
Oh, of course. I just think when you've gone down the extreme body modification route, you know, look at Blair White. What's going on there? Like, that's an enormous amount of surgery and hormones, and that's, to me, not evidence of somebody who's completely well balanced. And I don't think it's healthy.
Yeah, what is your response to that?
Her response?
No, your response to that. Now, I noticed you say he and you say her and she.
Yeah, I think that it's true you cannot change your sex. It seems to me to be obvious that you either have XX or XY chromosomes. It's all sexually reproducing creatures have. But as we've talked about, human beings are unique, not in terms of their genotype so much, but rather in terms of their mind. So although you might be able to say clearly female anatomy and genitals, even a scientist or a neuroscientist could look at a scan of a brain and say, brain of a woman, brain of a man. But the mind is not like this. The mind it has no gender. And although we might have certain genetic impulses,
You mean, okay, unpack that. What do you mean the mind has no gender?
because the mind is a universal explainer, as we've discussed before, that it just creates knowledge. In theory, a child brought up, you know, thinking that it's a dog or something. I think there's been those cases of kids raised as wolves or whatever. The mind is almost infinitely malleable. And so in that way, a person who is born male can be raised female, might be even coerced by their parents to a large extent, and for all intents and purposes behave as if they are female. All that says, that doesn't say they've changed their sex by any stretch of the imagination. But what it does say is that this concept of gender is a feature of our minds, not a feature of our brains or a feature of our bodies. And so I think with someone like Blair White, there's two things I would say about that. One is that she says, and I would agree with her, there are straight males, in fact they're not straight, but there are males who like that aesthetic. The aesthetic of chicks with a dick. The aesthetic of a female who has all the parts and a penis. And so that is a, what do you call it, a fetish. It's a fetish for some people. Yeah. And so I think she's had a long-term partner. And so that's a real phenomenon. Now I refer to it as a her because it seems to me, just to look at her, just as a matter of convenience, you could meet these people on the street and literally not be able to tell. Sometimes. Rather often you can, the ones who don't put in any effort, you know, they've got the beard and the dress. But sometimes that's the whole concept of passing. And so if a person passes, I just tend to say yes.
And so why are you're laughing? Why?
Well, first of all, is he pre-op? Has he had
no? I think now we're going to she and he. It just sounds really awkward. Blair she decided not to chop it off, but obviously she's had the operation upstairs.
Well, she hasn't fully committed then.
Yeah, because she understands all the awful stuff that can go wrong, and you know all the horror stories that the D changes.
I did not know that.
Yeah, no, she's decided against it. She was vacillating for a while.
Are you sure that's true
Absolutely.
recently?
Oh, yeah, I paid little attention to him, so it's very likely true.
So that tells me that Blair White is, now I'm not using any pronouns, that tells me that Blair White is not all in.
I don't know what it would mean. I suppose
well,
all in
I'll
means...
tell you exactly what it would mean. She had facial, or he, whatever, how you... Blair White had facial surgery.
Yes.
and then the upstairs operation, as you say, but not the downstairs operation,
That's
as you
right,
say.
yeah.
So that's not a commitment to me. That Blair White is not committed.
To
If Blair White were
but
truly
committed to.
well,
Because you can't change your sex, so you can't be committed to that. So we all agree on that. It's impossible to change your sex. So
yeah.
regardless of how committed you are, you're never going to achieve that. But
No,
can
but
you
there
can
is
you
a
be committed
level
to
of commitment. Chopping off your junk is a level of it is
Yeah.
far more committed. Like there are just things you can do. You can do nothing. That's no commitment. You can get hormones. That's a commitment. You can chop off your breast. That's a commitment if you're a woman.
Yeah.
You can chop off your penis and testicles if you're a man. That's a commitment.
You might be committed to passing, let's say.
No,
And if-
no. I would just say committed to the identity. I mean.
But apparently there's a thing where that men have this fetish where they like the someone who looks like a woman with a penis.
Yes.
Maybe
Well,
that's
that's not
it.
for me, dude. That's not for me.
But my
wasn't gonna cry.
pronoun use in my defense, my pronoun use is I like consistency. I like no messing. I don't want to have to judge, okay, this is a man, does he pass well enough that I'm going to call him she? And or I know some people they'll respect the pronouns of those who have the right opinions. Okay, so Blair White is against child transition, so I'll respect his pronouns, but this one over here, I don't approve of his opinions, so I'll call him he.
And that's bad?
I don't like the inconsistency. For me, it's...
Ideological. It's ideological.
Yeah, men are he and women are she, and I don't care how much you've done to your body. Like, think about with Blair, if you're talking about her penis.
Yeah, no, it's absurd. I know.
It
That
is
was
absurd.
Brendan Fraser's second chapter of his book.
Right.
We have to talk about her penis.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Yeah.
With Jazz Jennings, when I talk about Jazz Jennings, and if I were to talk about Jazz Jennings having her penis chopped off, it makes no sense to me. It's just absurd. So I do get caught out. The women on testosterone who really truly look like men, it's very hard for me to call them she. It messes with my head, but I try really hard to do it.
Does anything she say change your mind about whether or not you'll use he or she?
Language for me is just a means of communication, and it can never be perfectly precise. And so I can certainly imagine a situation where I'm interacting with someone and using particular pronouns because that person appears to be male. But then they tell me later on, oh, by the way, I've transitioned. And so what am I going to do at that point? Change? But in this particular circumstance, if I had Blair White in front of me, I'd refer to her as she precisely because I think it's a matter of courtesy. Now, of course, there's a limit to that.
Yeah, that's what I do. Like Rachel Levine, I caught mad grief by people when I did this All Things Reconsidered, and I would analyze NPR episodes with my friend Matt Thornton, and I would say she, and people lost their minds. But to me, I just try to be courteous.
I really would like to move away from this idea that using the wrong pronouns, playing along with the delusion is a sign of courtesy and respect. I would like to flip it the other way, that people who identify as transgender need to respect everyone else's right to use language that reflects reality. Flip the respect the other way. It's not a sign of respect that you're forcing me to deny the evidence of my own eyes and like calling Levine a woman, come on.
Yeah, I mean, there is, I don't know, I just keep coming back to this. I was on this boat in New Zealand. See that? Reed, I didn't mix up Australia and New Zealand. I was on this boat, it was a cruise, and there was a trans woman on the boat. And when I spoke about her in the third person, I said she. And I just did that just to be courteous. I just did that to be, I mean, obviously when I looked at this person, I saw a man with a wig.
Right.
But I didn't want to I'm not out to hurt anybody's feelings. It doesn't cost me anything. It doesn't cost me time.
Oh, it would cost me a lot. And there's another, my children, I have 2 children in high school, and there's an AGP, there's an autogynephilic man who's a teacher, and all the children have to call him Miss. And it's obviously, my children tell me he's
Yeah.
obviously not a woman. and
That's
it's
a
just
little different, though,
ridiculous.
don't you think? Like,
Well, it's a supposedly respect. You have to respect this man dressed as a woman in
no,
the classroom.
I wasn't saying anything about respect, just courtesy. Like, we're on a boat, everybody's drinking,
Sure.
and you know,
I would avoid pronoun use.
you would.
Yeah.
Well, that actually.
That's a key point. Like the fact that if I'm with you, at no point during this conversation am I even going to say she or her.
It's
We're talking-
impolite.
Yes,
Were you not
precisely.
raised to say to be impolite to use third person pronouns
In front of the person.
company of the person?
Precisely. So it's almost a
Right.
moot point.
Right.
But when I'm referring to, like, if I knew she was going to be watching this video,
Yeah.
but again, I can't get out of it because in my head, she refers to herself as she, and everyone I think of that knows about her work refers to her as she. And when I picture her, I see a woman, and so it's hard for me to go he. It's more I suppose I feel the same way.
Like the
that you would
women
do.
with the beard, with the testosterone, like that, it messes with my head to call them she. I have to actually make a real effort to call them she.
And I suppose there are times when you don't know.
It's happened to
well,
me.
yeah.
Oh, it has definitely, and I don't mind. That's fine if I make a mistake. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have something. So I was teaching, and I used to say when people raise their hand, I used to say, "Yes, sir," "Yes, yes, young lady," something like that, "Yes, young man," and somebody complained.
Okay.
So I had to stop saying that, and I'd say "you."
Which
You.
is so impolite.
You.
Isn't that impolite?
Well, it is, but it just got me out of just more grief. These people were masters at stealing my own time. And if I can tell a very brief story, so, you know, the first day of class, and these were big classes, like 120, and usually I let in 10, 20 people over or maybe not 20, 10 people over the cap. So there's a big class. I used to end the first one with like 20 minutes. People would come and give me paperwork or whatever. And, so in that 20 minutes at the end of class, this person came up to me and said, "I need to tell you something. I can't remember what they said, gender, something about it." I'm like, "Oh, fuck." And so I said, "Hey, get back to me at the end." And I just thought that they would go away because I just knew. So I was interpreting that through like there's a complaint that's going to be lodged. Like because at that point. And so they said, they didn't. They waited around and they said, "Well, this is a totally true story. I can't remember, the class was like 11 to 1. It's like an hour and 50 minutes. This person said, at noon on Tuesdays, Thursdays, I go by this pronoun.
Oh my God.
And then this day, at this, I go by this pronoun. And then they said in another one, I never even heard of it. And I said, I can't do that. Like, and I'm not going to do that. Like, I got actual shit I have to teach. I got 130 people. I got to keep stuff in my head. I got to there's no possible way I could remember your pronoun or anybody's pronoun. Like,
And why would you want to? It's just ridiculous.
I mean, I just knew when I said it, this is going to cause me grief.
But that.
And did it? Did it? Were you supposed to respect that?
No, it didn't. But it did. But it didn't cause me major grief. It caused me very minor grief. And at that point, I think there are other things that came wrong. But I just remembered thinking wow, what a complicated life you must have. Like, what are you looking at your clock, at the days and the times, and then a pronoun I never even heard of, like I can't remember, zucchini or something.
But
I don't know.
it's clearly a lie as well. Like, clearly that person doesn't actually feel like they've changed gender and need a new pronoun at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a form of narcissism where it's, look at me, I need special attention, and if you dare not do this, then I'm going to accuse you of everything under the sun, and because you're a teacher, you're going to have to pass me.
And there's a whole mechanism in place to punish me, to punish people who just don't agree with it. The university where I teach, where I will not name, in order to say at the class to fail someone, you had to give their last date of attendance. And so in order for me, I'm literally dealing with 300 people. I mean, I'm dealing with a crazy number of people a term. So I had to have somebody take attendance. And by the way, to punish me at this unknown university, they took away my TAs at the end. They were so incensed at me. But so one of the things I used to do is I used to ask people if you had a doctor's note, you could get out of it. So this person comes, this very, very attractive young woman comes up and she hands me this paper, please excuse Mr. So-and-so from class. And I'm like, well, what do you give, where the story is going? I'm like, what are you giving me this for? She's like, well, I need to be excused from class. I'm like, okay, but why are you giving me this? Who's Mr. So-and-so? She said, oh yeah, see, I guess she again. He said, yeah, there's, there's a lot of confusion there. I'm Mr. So-and-so. And I'm like, okay, so if I even paused or even looked at her like, what are you talking about? That's a complaint. I'd be in the diversity board, office, like some, gender genocide, it was something insane. So I'm like, oh, that's great. Like, it just wasn't worth saying. I mean, even then, what am I going to say? I mean, what could I possibly say? And one more thing. So I had somebody come to my office once, and again, for the most part, the individual people were okay. They came to my office, and some guy came in, beard, everything, and he's talking to me, and he takes off his jacket, and he has these massive breasts. And my brain had, I couldn't, I'm just too, I remember saying to myself, I'm too old to figure this out. Like, I cannot, so yeah, I mean, numerous stories like that.
The curious thing is that people often denigrate philosophy and say, oh, philosophy, what a useless sort of subject that is. And yet this is applied relativism. The consequence of embracing the idea that there is no difference between truth and falsity, there is no difference between good and bad, leads to, well, therefore, the science on sex is completely fluid. You can just interchange male and female and it doesn't matter. Social conventions such as the pronoun thing don't actually matter. There's not really a right or wrong way, even though we had the dispute about what to call Blair White. But I understand that there exists social conventions about the use of pronouns for a good reason. And once you start to say to people, use any pronoun that you like, you're just saying to the relativists, have at it. You can, society can run any way at all without having any rules.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not unsympathetic to that. There is something like, again, the problem is not people want to call themselves something. The problem is that there's some institutionalized mechanism that makes you call them something.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like you can call yourself, what is it wolf two-spirit or like, some
Two-spirit?
It's too
We have
inconvenient.
two-spirit.
We can't.
Like, I mean, I honestly am too busy and I just don't give a shit. Like,
No one has the cognitive overhead
honestly don't care what I truly don't care. But there's something about forwarding this as part of an integral identity and validating, and everybody's about validating. And anyway, I have some questions here. I'm going to read these. The cost of producing educational content has fallen nearly to zero, yet some people insist on reforming the traditional university model. Would we, pro-Enlightenment people, not be better off empowering those new models of education, YouTube, rather than trying to revive a disease-ridden dead horse?
Well, I'm with you, Peter, that the existing educational institutions as they are, especially schooling, should be completely done away with. I mean, there should be a free market for education. If parents 100%. Want to send or if children rather want to go to a particular school, they should have school choice. And as for the university system, I mean, university system should largely be about research. And if you want to go there to learn, then you hook yourself up with a mentor who can help guide you through. But yeah, I agree. It's very difficult to reform.
And every time I say to someone, burn it all down, they're like, you don't actually mean burn it down. I'm like, okay, here's one. Is there a Detransitioner Day of Awareness in Canada? We're attending the event in DC with GenSpect US, excited to swamp the Capitol. Is there a Detransitioner Day of Awareness Day in Canada?
We don't have an event organised, no. There is Detrans Awareness Day internationally, but there's no event in Canada.
Okay. Are pronouns here to stay as a social convention, even if, miraculously, the woke gender ideology nonsense goes away? It has invited a lot of discourse about gender roles and expression. Are pronouns here to stay as a social convention?
As in respecting people's absurd pronouns?
I mean, I've heard people say they want to switch to no pronouns. I've heard people say, I've basically heard the gamut of things.
I think pronouns have worked really well for a very long time when describing reality. I don't think we need to change anything. We just need to use them to describe reality.
And it's a bizarre impulse with the present movement with respect to pronouns. It seems to butt up against the way in which certainly English evolves. English evolves, certainly, but bottom up. There's no top-down authority that says this is the way. In France, maybe there is with French. You know, they have the.
They don't
this is the
let
way
it. They
used.
don't let it evolve.
Right,
French doesn't evolve.
Yes, yes.
If gender, as we use it today, was explicitly coined to obfuscate sex differences and blur the reality of sex, wouldn't it be best to acknowledge it as an unsubstantiated phenomenon?
I don't know. My position is that, look, people can choose to identify and have whatever gender they like, but of course that isn't going to change the fact of the matter that you are a male or a female, except in these very narrow DNA cases, which are the fractions of a percent rounding error kind of thing. But if you choose to identify in an obscure way as a furry or as the different sex, different gender, then expect not to have a comfortable time. And if that's the kind of life you want to live and have difficulty and then constantly take offence and all that sort of stuff, that's on you. It's not on the rest of society to conform to your desire to, because let's face it, what are they doing? They are rebelling. They're going through sort of a teenage angsty type thing, or it's a fetish of some kind when people in middle age decide to do this, and they want attention. And as soon as we stop giving all the attention, they might very well dissolve away, and they'll rise up in some other fashion.
So I have something I don't understand. I don't understand a lot of this stuff. It's just bizarre to me. How is it that like furries are a thing? Like, how did that get to be a thing? Like, is that a contagion itself? Like, is that like? I mean, does that relate to evolution? Does it relate to, like, I don't understand how it's. I don't want to say common, but like I don't understand, like, how does that become a kind of sexuality?
The internet has done weird things to people, I think. So let's be clear what a furry is.
Yeah.
This is typically men. I don't think well, maybe there are female furries. They are turned on by the image of themselves as cartoon animals, right? That's what they get turned on by. So it's not zoophilia, it's not people sexually attracted to animals, but there is an overlap there as well, in that I think there are a lot of people in the furry community who are attracted to.
I love the use of that word, it's everywhere now. So how does one, like, I mean, is that like a category of sexual orientation when you're born? You know, you're gay, you're bi, you're straight.
You're a furry.
You're a furry? Like, is that just like I mean, I find that hard to believe that that's an innate thing.
No, I don't think it is. I think it's an internet-induced thing. I think people find themselves in weird places online and they just innocently step into this little weird area and then they become obsessed with it and then it becomes a sexual preference for them.
And people learn this behaviour. Like, pride is well named, because in previous times there was a certain level of shame, and possibly rightly so, about people's sexual proclivities. Because quite often they're weird, but you keep them behind closed doors. But pride says celebrate, no matter how strange and weird it is. So there may have always been a level of bestiality, undercurrent, but people didn't talk about it. But now it's like, well, you're interested in being a cat or being thought of as a cat, and you want a litter box in the corner of the classroom, go right ahead. And it's like,
yeah, it's okay. So I don't know, I'm going to push back on that. I think that there is a need for, and even an ongoing need for pride, gay pride, like coming out of the closet, or a sense of like, we're here, we're queer. I can't remember what the...
Are we not past that though? Have we not reached societal acceptance? We don't need the whole gay pride thing. I'm all for bringing back shame. Put everything back in the bedroom. I don't need to see everyone's sexual proclivities. I don't. Even autogynephilia, can we just put that back in the bedroom?
We have to know, like, that's the epistemology question again, like epistemology has to precede everything else. We have to know what to be ashamed about. Like, I mean,
it's not even shame, it's just that you don't have to be ashamed of your sexuality. It's just that, isn't there something you want to keep private between you and the people you're engaged in sexual relationships with, rather than having it on full display? I'm reminded of Douglas Murray's comment on this, which is that with the gay rights movement, it's like the train was pulling in slowly to the station and about to arrive at the destination before the driver decided to just hit the accelerator, and now we've gone straight through trans and furries and every other weird sexual proclivity that people have on full display for the world. So that now you go to a pride parade, children are there alongside guys with their dicks out walking down the street, and it's like, this is absurd.
Yeah.
And there is a reason why you don't have adult males, penis out, next to little children.
Yeah,
There's a reason why society figured that out a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, when we were in Reed's neighborhood, of course, in Reed's neighborhood, there was a thing where some dudes were pissing on other dudes. And I'm like, okay, if that's your thing, that's fine. It's your thing, whatever. It is what it is. But like,
In the bedroom.
in the bedroom, like,
There you go.
I don't even want to see it.
No one needs to see that. Just,
Yeah.
It's fine if you want to do it in private. Bring back shame.
Rebels and Marxists misunderstand at times, and relativists, that even if you can't fully articulate why particular cultures and customs are the way they are, why good manners is the way it is, doesn't mean there's not actually a good reason behind it. It doesn't mean that our Western enlightened society evolved that tendency to keep your sexual life in the bedroom for a good reason.
Okay, so I'm going to throw you a total curveball. And if this is just like too weird, let me know. So my thinking was, because again, none of these people will talk to me, like literally no one. And we even went around at this thing with a camera, and only one person talked to me. And nobody would talk to, but if the idea is you want to normalize these behaviors, and then maybe there's some little kid who has like a pee fetish, or I mean, I'm just saying, throwing that out there, then you can't do that if you're not allowed to do that in public. But let's say that we agree on that as a society. Wouldn't that be a reason to allow kids to access pornography?
Sorry, what?
Well, like, so many people have different sexual proclivities and things that they like, and a lot of people don't even know what they like. If you forbade the idea that you could do these things in public, so like, I didn't even know until I was in college that two dudes kissed each other. Like, I just didn't know it was a thing. You guys are probably looking at me like, what is but the idea is that you would kind of say, hey, look, we're here, we do this. But if you say that you don't want that, then people need some kind of ways to say, oh, well, this person's into like X, Y, Z, like, or I feel that this would be sexy or whatever, I'd like this. But if you don't do it in public, you need some way for people to, I would think you'd need some way for people to have outlets for that. Or am I wrong?
You don't-
Well, has society not functioned
Right.
well enough up until this point?
People figured it out.
Yeah.
Have done for millennia.
Yeah, but I mean, you could make the same argument about anything. I mean, the internet, wouldn't pornography, I'm gonna get 5,000 comments. Like, every time I wonder about something or say like, hey, leave this person alone who engages in this activity, I was like, because he eats his own shit. Like, what are you talking about? But it does seem to me you would have to reason to the position. I mean, I'm trying to think like, like my kids are gay, and like my daughter, if she wasn't in Portland, maybe if she lived 50 years ago someplace else, she just never would have seen it. And I think she told me I can't remember the name of the show. There's some show she watched that it was just a huge thing for her to see a gay protagonist on the show. She's like, wow, she's like me. And so maybe there's something, if you're gonna make it so that it's not normative or it's not a thing in public, then don't you think it would help kids or people to access these things? I mean, there are limits on that, of course. Like, you don't want to like drinking blood or something. Like, there are limits, but or are you guys looking at me like I'm insane?
No, I think you go.
I remember in England a few years ago, there was this crazy story that in the sex ed curriculum for grade 7, 8, they were teaching about anal sex and all sorts of really extreme sex acts in grades 7 and 8. And there was uproar, obviously, and they took it out. And I just think, you can figure that out later when you're an adult and you're experimenting. You can figure out what you like. And if you don't have the imagination, then you may never figure it out, and that's quite all right. But I don't think we need to have people peeing on each other in the street.
No,
just
well,
so
okay.
someone who might
Okay.
have that kind of proclivity can discover
But
themselves.
it's certainly true that we have stigmatized things in the past that we ought not to have stigmatized.
Sure.
I mean, for sure. And so then the question is, how do you know you're stigmatizing? Again, I just know I'm getting 5,000 people. Bogosian wants everybody to piss on everybody. No, that's actually not what I'm saying. But like, because we've stigmatized the wrong things in the past, how do we know that we're not currently stigmatizing things that no one? I mean, I guess it all comes back to it's just no one else's business.
We are, no doubt we are. We are going to seem, in the same way that we look at our ancestors as moral midgets, as getting many things wrong, the people in the distant future are going to look at us as being backward and primitive and whatever else. But this is not an argument for undertaking a wholesale cultural revolution towards allowing men to piss on each other in the streets. What it says is that you incrementally allow for change as required. And so the incremental change of accepting that two men can walk down the street holding hands. Okay, that's a little change. Let's see how it works for a while, for a few years. Okay, society hasn't fallen apart. Let's see the next thing. But you don't need to just have every single sexual fetish and gender and weird thing happen all at once. What about we just change a little bit here and there as people?
Okay.
Otherwise, what problem are you solving, really?
Okay, so that gets back to why I do use people's preferred pronouns, because I think that nuance is dead. And it's like, for so many people, the fact that you call someone who's clearly a man a she in front of them, next thing leads to like women and men's back. Like, there's no cutoff. Like, it has to be all or nothing. And I think sometimes it's just more nuanced than that.
I know I'm hard line on the pronouns, and it's a political stance though for me. I make a very specific effort to call all women, even if they have beards and they look like men, I call them she, because it's a political thing. But it's also, for me, the pronoun is, if you're calling Rachel Levine she, which frankly is ludicrous to me, it's just ludicrous.
Yeah.
Are you not sending a message to the 13-year-old girl who thinks she's a boy? You're sending that message to her that he's changed sex, or society's going to affirm his delusion, so therefore they should affirm hers, and she can therefore be a he as well.
Yeah, I'm still thinking about what you said, and I think that I have teetered on the brink of doing that. Like, if I agree with someone ideologically, I'll use their pronouns, and so if I don't, I won't. But I never fully fell into that trap, and I've always tried to, again, it's courtesy, but I could be wrong. All right, let me see what we got here. It's very easy to say burn down all the universities when you're thinking about useless degrees like gender studies, more than that. But what about the sciences? We need people to have lab skills and who know the theory.
No, we don't.
You don't?
Science education, as it is right now, teaches people the existing body of knowledge.
Yeah.
If you want to be an engineer, that's fantastic. If you want to be a pure scientist like a physicist, the worst thing that you can do is to learn what every single physicist already knows, because you'll be trapped within that framework. If you want to make discoveries, you have to somehow escape from that. And I know for a fact that, having done a physics degree, you spend the first year or two of your undergraduate course learning Newton. No one who's a professional physicist needs Newton. They are trying to improve upon quantum theory. They're trying to improve upon general relativity. It is a waste of people's time to essentially extend high school for the next 3 or 4 years of an undergraduate degree, when there could be a different model. And that different model is what I mentioned before, especially if you're a science student, which would be to be teamed up with a professional physicist and begin on day one that you're out of high school, working on new problems, learning quantum physics, learning what's at the cutting edge, without having to go through all of this rigmarole of, what were the last 3 or 4 centuries like in physics? Because you're learning the history of science. This is what Newton did. This is what Gauss did. This is what Faraday did. And it's like, okay, yeah, but that's all been improved upon. That's all been falsified. That's in the bin of history now. And it's interesting for historians of science. But as for actual real life physicists,
all right, well, Cynthia, there you go. All right, Eric, so this is to you. Misuse, can I call you Mia? Why? I always like to throw my guests curveballs. Why would one be proud of the sex they're attracted to? I think the question should be, should one be proud of the sex they're attracted to? Why would one be?
That's a question for me.
Well, I don't know. It's just a question here. I just threw it out for you.
I think it was just the counterweight to people being ashamed of being homosexual. They were just correcting.
Yeah.
It's not. That's what pride was.
Yeah,
right?
and I got a lot of grief for that. I argue you can only be proud of something you've worked for.
Yeah.
All right. So the next thing, if you're going to grant someone the title of she, why wouldn't you give them access to the bathroom for she's? I guess that's a question for me. Because I think it's possible to be nuanced on this. Maybe you don't. I think it's possible to you don't have to buy into it wholesale. I don't see why you would. I don't think those things are necessary correlates.
I just
You probably
think,
do.
well, no, I don't know that it necessarily means he gets to go in the bathroom, but if you read news articles and it's, a trans woman was very upset because she was asked to leave the female changing room or something like that, that gives a very different image in your mind to a man got angry because he was asked to leave the female changing room. There's much more precision of thought, much more clarity of thought.
I can see that.
And you can see the conflict of rights when you use clear language.
Yeah, now I'm shifting one mat.
Okay.
I can definitely see that. I don't know, one of my, I wouldn't say golden rules, maybe silver rules, is I just try not to be a dick, and I just try to be like,
I've never
But
seen
I don't think I'm being a dick by using accurate pronouns. It's
Yeah.
not being disrespectful, it's just describing reality, using language that reflects reality. I am offended when people try and make me use language that is not.
God, I would love to have someone here telling me why we're wrong on this. I would just love to have, but they won't come on. Anyway, what were we going to say?
I was going to say, I've never seen a debate about which bathroom to use on an aeroplane. I don't know why that just is. It seems to be the rule more and more.
There's single stalls.
Yeah, of course, that's what I mean. Like in LA, Madame Tussauds rooftop bar, I was there the other night, and new bathrooms, and it's all just single stalls. I mean, problem solved essentially. I don't like the idea of men's urinals. It's not a disgusting place. You have to go in there. I'd rather just have a private stall all the time. But insofar as they still exist, one has to be sceptical and one has to be questioning, why do you so desperately want to go into the women's bathroom when you don't really look like a woman? I'd be very suspicious about that person.
Of course. Any man who chooses to go into the women's bathroom is marking himself precisely as the type of man women don't want in the bathroom, because he's the type of man who doesn't respect women's boundaries.
Yes, yes. And so in both senses, if future building projects go towards cubicles, it solves the problem of the predatory male, because you can escape from them.
There are some logistical problems, like stadiums and stuff. You can't give everybody. I can't remember where it was. I think it was in Austria or someplace. I can't remember. But there was a bathroom that said, this was what you read. It's at the theater, I think. It said cis. One bathroom is for cis and one bathroom is non-cis. And I just looked at that like, I just have to keep processing that. Like
I still don't.
Yeah, I know. It took me, and I'm not even sure I get it, but I just stood there looking at it. Okay, a couple more questions here. To Peter, would you be a dick if you refused to call an anorexic fatty, even if they really believe they're fat? Well, that's quite the question. I had one of my former TAs became a professor, and she called me and she said, I have someone in the class who goes by it as their pronoun, and I don't know what to do. And I said, I just immediately thought to myself, like, if I ever called somebody it, even if they wanted to be called it, I would get literally 50 complaints from everybody else in the class, and that the diversity board would love that. It would be just, they would just love to steal my time for that. So that's where my mind goes there. But I don't know, as a general rule, I call people what they want to be called. I mean, I met a guy once whose name Mustard, gave himself that name, weird appellation, but I called him Mustard. Hey, Mustard. You know.
But in that particular situation, I mean, just appeal to the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. I mean, anorexia is a real thing, and you don't want to feed into the anorexic person's delusion by saying you're fat, and so then that's a different situation. I would say it's not one to one.
It's the same. I don't think you want to be affirming the delusion of a 13-year-old who thinks she's a boy, or even an autogynephilic man who thinks he's a woman. I don't think that's good for them.
Yeah, again, first do no harm. So I would say in a situation like Blair White, again, if she's in front of us, I'm not going to be, the pronoun issue is a non-issue because I'm saying Blair or whatever else. But if she's in earshot and I'm over here, the first do no harm thing would not be feeding into her delusion if I'm having a conversation with someone saying, oh, she's over there, or where's Blair? She's over there. It's like, to say he's over there, knowing full well that she's going to feel, well, actually, in her particular case, she probably doesn't give a damn because she's that kind of person. But I imagine there would be some that would actually feel something bad. But I can't imagine that situation in real life. It's just a non-issue for me because it never comes up. This is one of these abstract philosophical things. What would you do? And it's like, well, when it happens, let's see.
Yeah, it's amazing how much time we spent talking and thinking about something so ridiculous.
Yeah. That never happens in real life. I've never been in a situation where I've had to think, what pronoun should I use now for this person? It's just, this is a fraction of a percentage of people who are trans, a fraction of whom care about the pronoun issue.
I mean, even us talking about this whole thing is so idiotic. But like Mia was telling me that because I told her it's pretty dark and I don't like to think about it. I just don't want it in my consciousness. It has to have a detrimental psychological effect, particularly long term. But she said correct me if I'm wrong, it's just fascinating. And so she looks at it from the angle that's fascinating. Okay. Do we need to make a distinction between respect and dignity? One is the default, the other earned. Telling me to repeat falsehoods like an authoritarian does not earn my respect. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, that's Peterson's thing and Gadd's thing. It's that you're telling other people what to do is the problem. Again, you can't prevent, nor should you try to prevent, people from self-identifying as anything they want. You know, it's like super creepy to me. Are these dudes who like wear these furry costumes and they go around kids' playgrounds and stuff. That's like uber creepy. And, you know, that's the question, like, should that be illegal? I mean, that's just super creepy.
Surely that should.
Yeah, I mean, there's just something about, I mean, I don't know, get a room and have your own furry party and check everybody's ID if they're 18 or something. But there's just something about, like, it seems predatory to me.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm only looking for the question mark here. Douglas Murray just spoke about this brilliantly at a UK conference. I guess it was ARC. We're wasting valuable time dealing with this stuff. We've known for thousands of years. Reality doesn't change. Yeah, it's always amazing to me. You know, people are arguing about just the stupidest shit when people are trying to sneak nuclear weapons into our cities. I mean, it's just a crazy waste of time. It's just an insane waste of intellectual horsepower from the things we could be thinking about and doing. So how do you deal with that? Like, it's just ceaseless. I mean, that's what you do.
How do I deal with the fact that it's an enormous waste of my time?
No. How do you deal with the fact that you really, I mean, I acknowledge, like I fully acknowledge, we absolutely need experts. Like we need people like you who have done the homework, done the deep dive. Are you ever at all resentful? Do you ever feel like the sucker fish, you know, the fish in the tank that cleans out all the crap, that you have to be the sucker fish for this one issue that's like legitimately harming an enormous number of young people?
No, not really. Honestly, as I said, like it fascinates me. I have this, and I probably have done this to myself just so I don't lose my mind, but I've always loved history, and I feel like I think we're living through something like the Salem witch trials, one of those completely insane historical events that will be talked about and studied for hundreds of years to come. And that's what fascinates me. And I almost, it's not a privilege, but it's an amazing thing to be a part of. It's an amazing thing to witness, to know that you're in the midst of one of those crazy events.
Can I ask you about that? Because that is the part that animates me on this issue, which is where children have had the surgeries and been transed essentially, but are told these procedures are reversible. That seems to be exactly what you're speaking to. That is the kind of such an aberration that we are going to look back and clearly point to wide-scale government-assisted abuse of children. Is that the worst part of this entire thing?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is the fact that we involved children. It would have been bad enough, frankly. The whole experiment would have been bad enough if we hadn't turned our attention to children. But there is something about, like, I don't know if you've ever spent much time scrolling trans TikTok and just the thousands upon thousands of videos of these girls they're teenage girls, they've got mastectomy scars, and it's really truly a ghoulish horror show. And the Salem witch, like the fact that it's so mad in my mind is because not only are we doing it, but it's happening in plain sight. People march in the street celebrating it and demanding that it continue. We teach children the idea in school, and therefore we indoctrinate them into this absurd belief system in school that then there's the school to clinic pipeline, and there's that angle to it. There's our politicians are all parroting the slogans and the mantras and passing laws to make sure that these children fall victim to the scandal. It's mad on so many levels. The gay rights groups that once fought against conversion therapy are now fighting for gay and lesbian adolescents to fall victim to this new conversion therapy. Everything about it is mad.
Why don't the horror stories of detransitioners seem to have any effect?
That's a great question. I have wondered that.
Because there's so few of them. I think it's simply, people will listen to Chloe Cole or whomever, but they think that's just a one-off. Less than 1% regret. That's what we're constantly told all the time. Less than 1% regret rate. And so if it's just 1% feel that way and 99% are living their best life and they're happy and it saved their life and everything's wonderful, then yes, that's tragic, but everyone else is really happy. The problem, as we were talking about yesterday, is the floodgates have yet to open. They're all there. We've had the first wave of detransitioners. We're on the second wave now. There will be many more waves and they'll get bigger every time. But none of them dare speak because, first of all, they get attacked by trans activists. The attacks are so vicious. And I think as well, they're going through something so terrible. The trauma is so awful and the damage to their body is so terrible. They don't want to thrust themselves out and make themselves such a villain and be attacked because they're in a really fragile
In their
mental
communities
state.
would then say, oh my God, we supported you for all this. What are you talking about? You were wrong.
And they're conditioned as well to think, because they've been in the trans community for so long, they're conditioned to think that if they speak out, they'll be harming transgender people. They'll do harm to the trans community, so they keep quiet for that reason. They're all there, and one day we'll see them all, and then we'll know what a terrible crime we've allowed to happen.
Yeah, so as much as I try to make this not political, if I say red and blue, you know what that means? Yeah. Why are the Democrats, why have they fallen for it? And many Republicans have as well, don't get me wrong, but why have almost all of the Democrats fallen for this hook, line, and sinker? What is it about, like, why wasn't it, or could it have been the other way around? Could all the Republicans have fallen for it, but the Democrats like, oh, this shit is insane.
To me, it looked like gay rights in the beginning. Nobody knew what they were supporting in the beginning. The Democrats were the champions of gay rights. Trans activism waited for gay rights to be over, then made their civil rights campaign look exactly like gay rights in every way on a superficial level. Gay rights organizations became LGBT, so that even solidifies it. It just looked like gay rights. And then I think they supported it. They had no idea what they were supporting. They went all in. And then how do you backtrack? Like, you actually have to say, we got this wrong. We did something terrible.
No one's
we
ever
got
going to
this
say
wrong.
that.
Of course not.
They're never going to say that. That's just not how people operate.
The Democrats are locked in. Trudeau, I mean, we have Trudeau in Canada, the Liberals, they're locked in as well. They can't possibly, as well, because they vilified everyone who spoke out against
Vilify
this.
in the extreme, I would add.
Oh, really? Yeah. So how do they backtrack? How do they turn it around?
So they have to keep, so this will tell you what kind of people they are. So they can't backtrack, so they realize, and I'm certainly not saying all of them, but I bet you many realized, like, wow, we have made a massive mistake. But because they don't say, I'm sorry, I was hoodwinked, I made an unbelievable mistake, they are allowing young men and women, boys and girls, children, they are allowing the mutilation, sterilization of children. I mean, these are foul people.
They can't say that they've made a mistake because they're relativists. And because they're relativists...
Okay, that's another part of it too, yeah.
That there is no objectively being wrong. So then it doesn't matter what amount of evidence you accumulate, number of cases of detransitioners that you present, they're not, if you're a relativist,
I would argue that's
a
very small part.
But it's a powerful voice, as has always been the case. You only need because conservatives and traditional types, unless you're an evangelical Christian or something like that, you're usually not animated enough to really get involved politically. You just want to live your life and you know the difference between right and wrong and true and false and whatever. But it's the people on the other side. Those people are very strongly politically energised, and it's usually the young. And they're seduced by relativism, and so they think there's no differences between the genders. They think there's no difference between good and bad, and so when you tell them they're making a mistake, how could they possibly be making a mistake? Because there's nothing to make a mistake about.
Mia, you're looking dubious.
Well, I mean, maybe that's for for the younger ones, perhaps. But like in my mind, I've got Trudeau in my mind right now. I think Trudeau knows he got this wrong. Although sometimes I think maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's just so pig-headed that he will not listen to the other side.
Yeah. Well, I think he knows, but the speculation is irrelevant at this point. But for those who do know, in other words, pointing out people, for some, for sure, they know. And that's, what is that thing, turf in the bed, sheets in the streets? What is it, like turf in the sheets?
Isn't it TRA in the streets, turf in the sheets?
Yeah, so you won't sleep with a trans woman or a dude if you're straight, so you don't really believe that trans women are women. It's like that's the James thing. Sorry, I had to bring back belief again, but you believe what you're willing to act upon, right? So they never believed in the first place. But there's something so vile, and I don't like the word evil, but really evil, about people who just want to say, they need to just hunker down on this. They know they've done something ghastly, and they're continuing to allow it to children. And they vilified and called, like your buddies, they called everybody Nazis and all these crazy shit. And they just can't, they just can't do it.
Since the Enlightenment, there's always been anti-Enlightenment impulses. We've lived through communism, fascism, and this wokeism, of which this is a particular kind, is just a species of rejecting what is good in our society. And my pessimism here would be, even if you solve this eruption of irrationality around trans, there will rise up some other new anti-Enlightenment. Who knows what shape it will take?
100%, I guarantee it. I literally bet my life on it. Yeah, I actually have a speculation about what that is, but did you want to say something before I read on?
No.
Okay. It's a lack of critical evaluation, too. So many things that the left has fallen for is perfectly understandable if you recognize that they all knew about it at the surface levels. Green policy, life-saving, etc. But they need only be called that something adopted prima facie. They won't look to see what extent those descriptions are accurate. And someone wrote this, Peter wrote this, that was Corey. Woke has a definite moral philosophy. It's the liberation of the oppressed. Cis heteronormativity oppresses. Therefore, all the trans activist policies follow from that moral, quote unquote, truth.
That's what is claimed by the woke ideology at times. And it's the same as Marxism before it. It expresses what is good in terms of oppressed versus oppressor. And so if you're the oppressed, you're the victim, and so therefore you deserve more moral credence. However, woke is subtly different to that. Woke is this unholy alliance between a form of Marxist oppressor narrative aligned with a certain form of postmodernism, saying that everything that exists that we regard as good is not actually good, that truth is in fact relative. They might very well say, but what is good is, you know, the oppressed person, and what is bad is oppressing, but only in certain moods. I don't think it's a fully coherent ideology. And I spoke to David Deutsch about this recently, who said at least the Marxists of the past would be able to give you a good account, for example,
100%.
of the means of production and
100%.
how income works and that kind of thing. A woke person can't do anything of the sort. There is no real ideology there. They can spout the talking points of oppressor, oppressed, but to say that that's a deep moral foundation, I don't think so. I think it's quite superficial.
This is from Bob. What does Mia believe is the most important thing for people to do to turn this around? What can people do beside dissent?
Oh, goodness.
Great question, but an involved one.
What can you do? I firmly believe that everyone's got to inoculate children before they reach the stage where they're going to fall into this. Once your kid's in there, there's no pulling them out. So I'm a firm believer in talking. I've been talking to my kids about this for years. Ground your kids in reality. That's the only way to protect them. Talk to everyone. I talk to everyone everywhere I go, using plain language. I say things clearly. I don't mess around.
Yeah, it's just, the whole thing is so disheartening and so tragic. I mean, if I may rewind for a second, I really want to go back to that point of somebody who knows that what's happening to children is wrong in the worst possible way, but they're a politician or they're elected, and they just can't admit it just because of their behavior of like calling everybody a Nazi and all this. Like, I just cannot fathom a lower form of human.
It's cowardice, really, isn't it?
It's the worst. It's the kind of cowardice that puts your own kind of sense of, I don't know what it is, above what you've been elected to do, or just humanity. Keep these kids safe. And it's, like you said, it is fascinating. It's ubiquitous. I mean, it's just the sheer number of people who have fallen for this. I don't know. I mean, we're going to look back at this and we're going to be like, I don't know. Like, people are like, well, how did the Nazis fall for it? Well, I mean, how did you behave the last few years? What did you say when they, right? Yeah, you're nodding your head. Like, what did you say when they were going after the one guy who said, oh, what's the evidence for this? Well, why do you believe transphobe, homo, Nazi, calling up, people where they give talks and saying this guy hates trans people? I mean, these people are unbelievable.
Some of the politicians I almost forgive, because they outsource so much of their critical thinking to scientists, to so-called experts, who are really would place the blame with is medical professionals who are telling the politicians, no, we can reverse this, don't worry. If they take the hormones for 3 or 4 years, puberty
It's a
blocks,
lie.
and
Total
if they chop
lie.
off the penis, you can pop another one on later on. It's absurd. But how do they live with themselves? Because they must know they're lying. The plastic surgeons must know they're lying. The whoever provides the hormones.
I don't think they do. People get upset with me when I say this, but you know, the psychology of the true believer, like they bought into an idea, and they really, truly, actually believe that idea with every fibre of their being. I think most people in WPATH, they're treating actual transgender children who will kill themselves if they don't have access to this medical pathway. That's what they believe. It's not true, and they've convinced themselves of that.
So you're saying these medical professionals literally don't understand the science, the own science that they're...
They produce mountains of garbage junk science. I don't know if you've ever read any of the citations that these people, honestly, you would not believe. You wouldn't believe how appalling it is.
Right.
But I was just, it just popped into my mind when you were talking about that. Have you ever heard of the scandal of prenatal X-rays? Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Like the willful blindness that happens in the medical profession, it's a recurring theme. Like they started X-raying pregnant women, I think, in the 1950s, and then they noticed that toddlers and small children were dying of leukemia. And a woman figured out the link, absolutely for sure she figured out the link that it was because of prenatal X-rays. And they carried on X-raying pregnant women for 25 more years after she figured out the link. So they carried on killing children, literally killing children for 25 more years, simply because they'd all bought into this idea that there was a threshold below which X-rays were safe. And if they accepted that the X-rays were killing these children, they had to get rid of that theory. And so there was willful blindness. They just refused to see what was right there.
Or perhaps a more cynical explanation is they didn't want to admit they were wrong and lose face.
And those are definitely a part of that. And they didn't want to admit that they were wrong and that they had been killing children.
Right.
That's a very difficult thing to admit.
In the same way that these people are, and I guess it would have been so much easier to say we made a mistake if they didn't absolutely eviscerate in public, cancel, censor, the most crazy shit they did to people. It would have been so much easier to make a mistake. All right, we need to wrap it up. We're losing light. Thanks to all the paid subscribers. We appreciate it. And thanks for coming and doing this today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Keep watching.